Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about author identity and social networking at arXiv. This is work in conjunction with Nathan Woody, Torsten Schwander, who's sitting just back there, and Paul Ginsberg, all from different parts of Cornell, and I'm pleased to acknowledge support from the Microsoft Technical Computing Initiative. And as my dear friend Paul has announced that in a large public forum, I am not a librarian, I'm a library functionary, apparently. So this is the one-slide summary of arXiv. arXiv's been going since 1991. It has a lot of physics, math, computer science papers in it. We passed 500,000 articles in 2008, October, and for the more geeky, perhaps appropriate to this building, 2 to the 19 articles in February 2009. The submission rate is about 60,000 articles a year, which translates to about 230 a day. And this really impacts everything we do. We have a staff of about 4 and a bit FTE, so that doesn't allow many minutes per submission. You know, we're very efficient in that sense. If you accounted for the arXiv budget in terms of what it would cost for each article submitted, it works out at a little over $6. But the flip side of that is there's no spare effort to do other things manually. We have a lot of downloads. We're open access, both at the reading end and the input end. And I think one of the things that we've done pretty well over the years is that we have a set of mirrors, we have a set of APIs supporting different protocols, and we've shared data with a lot of people. So we're sort of very well integrated, I'd argue. Michael hopefully will agree with me back there representing ADS. So that's the quick arXiv summary. So as I say, I'm going to talk about two things. The idea of author identity is something that's well known to this group of people called librarians who I now associate with. In terms of a repository, it might allow you to answer accurately the question, show me all the papers by this Y showing. Now, there are actually 100 people owning papers in arXiv with that initial and that surname. So you can see that while for C. Lugosi, it's very easy. You do a text search and you get all of his papers. For someone with that name, it just doesn't work. Now, of course, that's great within one repository. What we would actually like to do is answer this across the network of repositories. You know, it's much more interesting to say, show me all the papers this person has written anywhere. Combine the duplicates, provide a sensible map, and link it all up. The hope is that by identifying authors within one repository, you can then share this information and build up the network, what I'm going to call the publication network of all authors and all publications across the world. And when we started thinking about this, I started thinking of social networking, things like Facebook, as a way to encourage people to provide the information to solve these problems. And as we've played with this a bit more, I've changed my mind, and I've thought that actually, although I don't like to use it much, Facebook's actually pretty interesting. There are a lot of people, especially every graduate student at my university, for example, who use this regularly. And it's really interesting to think about what are the ways in which repositories can play in this world. You know, we don't just sit out there as distributors of a digital artifact that looks remarkably similar to the journal article we've been used to for years. You know, how can we enable different modes of communication? So, as I said, I'm going to talk about two things, and thing one is the author identifiers piece. This is an area with considerable interest at the moment, both in commercial domains, Elsevier, Scopus author ID, Thomson Reuters researcher ID. There's another big one, which I've forgotten right now. Various non-commercial efforts, the digital identifier for authors, is it in Netherlands? I can't remember. OpenID, a system not really designed for identifying authors in the scholarly domain, but more based around notions of authentication across systems. And there are scopes varying from things worldwide, country-based, the digital author identifier in Holland, then project-based, the REPEC project, they have an author ID scheme which they say reaches 80% of economists. and we're trying to do something within the scope of a single repository. Because we thought that any of these other schemes we might try to adopt wouldn't allow us to do the jobs we wanted to do within our repository. So, in a way, we're making the situation one worse by doing another thing. So, having made that decision because we believed we couldn't get the control we needed to do our job properly, how do we not make this a bad thing overall? So we've adopted an approach where an authID and arXiv is a URI, and we're trying to play the linked data game with that. So you can have this URI, so it's globally resolvable. It'll link you to a piece of data giving all the information we have in our repository about it. So hopefully this is a place to help different repositories interact. To date, we put this up in about March. We've got about 1,500 authors who've opted in to create, if they clicked a button that said, create me an author ID. To put that in context, we have 100,000 author accounts. So 1.5% of our people have so far clicked. And we're trying to provide services, which I'll tell you about, to encourage them to do this. Two pieces which we wish to do are to store equivalences. So someone can say, I am also known as X in the researcher ID scheme and Y in the Scopus scheme, and we'd like to share data using OAI ORE resource maps. So statistics are good for lying, right? That's a nice rising graph. It, of course, doesn't tell the story. We started here, and this number we've created, it would be a little more honest, perhaps, if I showed you the number that are created per week, the derivative of that graph, which looks a little less rosy, really. I think what this says is we've got kind of a steady rate of about 40 new people clicking on the I want to create an author ID within arXiv each week, which, 40 is not bad. But unfortunately, we have 150 people each week creating a new account and submitting a paper. So we're losing out. We're going to asymptote to about 25-30% of all authors on arXiv unless we can encourage more people to want to use this scheme. Well, I'm going to talk about that later, actually. We're probably going to end up creating them for various people based on what we can mine. But we thought, with any community, any change has resistance. We've got a large community. They don't like anything we change. So why don't we give them a chance to opt in and get used to it first? And that's really the approach we're taking. So, while I say the current rate of author ID creation in arXiv isn't going to get us to everyone having one, I'm not disheartened by it. I think there's sufficient interest. So one person who did go and create... Yeah. One person who did create one and forgot that they created one is Michael back there in the audience. His arXiv author ID looks like that thing up above. And following the whole sort of linked data idea, if you go and type that into your web browser, as I did up here, your web browser sends with it a bunch of information saying, hey, I'm a web browser, I like to see things in HTML. So we use HTTP content negotiation to return a human-readable page because we assume a human's getting to it. And this looks, for anyone who uses arXiv, rather familiar, a list of Michael's papers. I'm sorry the screenshot was a while ago, so it might not be completely up to date. It's the Firefox browser as distributed within the Debian version of Linux. Some licensing issues led them not to have Firefox. If, on the other hand, you came with a feed reader, or I explicitly tell it I would like an Atom feed, you'll get Atom data. Unfortunately, Firefox's display of Atom data rather unfortunately misses out important things like authors. And I recently found out that lots of people don't implement the Atom spec very well. Google Reader, if you have a whole bunch of author elements in an Atom feed, Google Reader will say, oh, I've got author elements, ignore. I'll take the last one and display that, which has led to a few complaints. Unfortunately, it's becoming the case that Google have this monopoly position and don't seem to listen to anyone, so I don't know what our odds of getting that fixed are, and whether I'll end up having some horrible workaround that says, oh, Google's coming, let's fudge that and give them one big author Oh well. So this immediately gives you the ability to subscribe to a feed of the papers by Michael Kurtz. Now, provided, of course, he either submits them himself or claims ownership of papers as he goes through things. We have, at the moment, no way within the submission process to arXiv to identify all the authors. We'd like to, but we're really worried that all our authors are going to get very upset about any process that makes their painful 5 minutes, 5.5 minutes. And we certainly have no way to demand that everyone identify the 2,500 authors on a paper from CERN or something like that. So I think that's a real challenge for the UI folks. So, something we've known about for a very long time on arXiv is that lots of physicists, everything they have is on arXiv. Instead of on their web homepage writing a list of their publications, they just say, click here to see my list of papers on arXiv. And it goes through the arXiv search and it displays it. Well, that's a couple of clicks. And now we have this better information perhaps than the search. So why not provide them with a piece of JavaScript they embed on their page, and so they can have the list of publications just show up within their homepage. So we did this, and we ate our own dog food on our help page here. So I embedded my author ID in the help page, and that pops up, one of the couple of styles we offer from this little widget, a list of my papers, which is dynamically grabbed from arXiv as it happens. Typical thing, you tell someone what little piece of JavaScript they embed, and that's all they need to do to make it work. So this page was the first web page that did that, using this sort of hip JavaScript in an otherwise somewhat 1994 styled web page. And I'm not going to try and pronounce his name or her name. So I guess we call this the Google Ads style display of papers. And we also offer a arXiv list style way to embed, and this person did a rather nicer job, I think, of making a home page that made sense. And of course, it picks up all the sort of CSS styling from the rest of the page, but yet has this dynamically included list of papers from arXiv. And if you look at how many times the applet is requesting the JSON data required to do this, we're getting several hundred, 700-800 hits a week at the moment, and that seems to be steadily going up. So I guess that's people continuing to add these pages. Of course, we can find out who's doing it because the referrer log we get says what page people got the feed from. So what are we going to do with this? Said this earlier, need to create a user interface archive which is associated with the person's author account, where they can say in some list of other schemes, my researcher ID is this. And then we can expose that along with our knowledge of what papers they own in an ORE resource map. So we have perhaps the resource map is a new representation that comes from the author ID. So it will have the aggregation of all their papers, perhaps some metadata about them, their name, maybe an alternate name, and these ORE similar to links up there to alternate IDs. That's where we plan to go with that part. And what do we do when we've got these relationships between different schemes? Oh, I think there are very faint blue blobs here representing two repositories. And the whole idea is that if you know the identity of A2, author A2 in one repository is the same as author A4 in the other repository, and they both expose their chunks of publication graph, this will hopefully, rather more reliably than any text-based mechanism could do, allow you to join the data from different repositories into the one big graph. Maybe put it in that triple store in the sky or the cloud. So, part 2, social networking. Having created an author ID, we now have a feed of the papers associated with someone. We created a Facebook application which allows you to do pretty much the same as that little JavaScript widget, but on your Facebook page. So somewhere in your profile it has a list of my current papers. We put that out in March 2009, and people have been gradually using it. We have, I guess, 1,300 users now, and about 50 unique users visit, if you know Facebook, the Canvas page each day. And I should credit Nate Woody for doing all the programming work associated with this. So we gradually expanded that. I guess this was the first person to detect that we'd done it before we announced it. And apparently believed it was an April's Fool at first. So the application, looks mostly like a Facebook thing, and this is the typical display. You get some choices about how you want it, whether you want the abstracts to appear or not. So this is Josh Ehrlich, who put up this list, and he can have it show in a separate tab in Facebook language or on the side of the profile. One of the problems with working with Facebook is you have to kind of get in the Facebook frame of mind for doing everything. It's certainly, to me, very non-intuitive. So over time, we expanded the interface to not only allow you to just display my papers, which is the list of papers associated with your author ID, but you might want to perhaps present any other papers to show up in your profile list, or maybe just a set of these papers. More interesting, perhaps, is we added the facility that when you're showing your list of papers, perhaps you'd like to give us a little bit of extra information in a Facebook way. And I'm going to, tag this guy. It's like, I know who he is. I'll tag him and link up the two Facebook accounts. We haven't started using this data for anything now, but as people tag things, we have the link between a name on an arXiv paper and another Facebook account. Obviously, if they come to us through Facebook and associate that with an identity in arXiv, we can do the complete link. We might also, even if they don't do that, be able to use that to improve the mining ability of associating identities together. So these graphs of use over time are pretty much the same as the earlier ones I showed. We seem to have got a bunch of people who are sort of coming back steadily, but we haven't hit the right mode to get people to run with it, perhaps. So now let's see if I can show you what we just created. So we'll just find a paper to start with. And since my friend Carl happens to have a really nice, unique name, we'll start there, perhaps. I'm not very good at using these little button mice things. So this is the standard arXiv display. We have various other links and services. We link, for example, to the DBLP bibliography service. And down here we have the usual set of bookmark things. And I'm going to try doing this with Facebook. I guess bookmark's not really the right term, but it seems to be a standard one. So fortunately, Lee logged out before we did this, so we don't see anything bad on his page. And I'm really now hoping that nothing bad is on my page. Facebook seems to be typically rather painfully slow at the moment. And, well, today is no exception. This is the standard arXiv application page on Facebook, and it's supposed to be busy popping up a box in the middle. Because, of course, I just said I wanted to bookmark that particular paper. I think maybe we're in demo world and it's not going to work. Okay, I give up. Fortunately, I have one I canned earlier. Now I'm going to be lost. Let's just minimize it. Okay. So what should have happened is that we got as far as this page, but this bit didn't appear. This bit appears, and of course now I have the ability to comment on that paper. It's brought in the metadata, it's linked it up appropriately, and perhaps the first truly wasteful thing we've done with bandwidth on arXiv is we've dynamically created a lovely little thumbnail of the actual paper we're commenting on, which we don't usually do wasteful gimmicks like that, but I'm really pleased with it because it's cute. And of course, since this is one of my papers, I can say this is awesome and post it and all my friends see it in the usual Facebook way. We put that out just a couple of days ago, so I'm hoping that this will encourage people to play that game. Of course, if it happens, then it will show up on your profile page like that. So do people use Facebook and arXiv? Just this morning I was looking to see, who's put the widget on their page, and this person has actually restyled the Google Ads bit of the widget and put their Facebook badge, which I guess is a dynamically generated little piece of Facebook through JavaScript, on their page as well. So he clearly used both, although he hasn't actually signed up to use the My arXiv applet, as far as I can tell. So Facebook is just one social networking site. We would like to play with others, so we thought the next one is Open Social. So we created a small application for Orkut in the same way as Facebook. Orkut was easy to work with because it's open and all that, but unfortunately it doesn't have any users, at least very few in the US. We're most interested to play with LinkedIn, partly because it's another pretty popular site, but also because it has rather different goals from Facebook. Facebook is all about chatting with your friends. LinkedIn supposedly is about professional contacts and things. So maybe we can reach a different community. Does anyone in this room have a contact with someone at LinkedIn? Because we would love them to talk back to us. This is the plea part of my presentation. We created the app on Orkut. We said, here, go have a look at it. We'd like to do the same and work with your network. And that was around June. We sent them a few more emails, begging, pleading, and so far, exactly no response. So no progress. But yeah, if you do have a contact, we would love some way to at least get someone to tell us whether they're going to let us in or not. So, to summarize, we started creating author IDs. They're just arXiv specific at the moment. We have sort of steady use, steady growth, but nothing overwhelming. The My Articles widget seems to be being used as a replacement to click to search for my papers on arXiv. Facebook application, again, we're getting steady use, but not overwhelming. And I think with things like this, we can't predict what the correct interaction method to create is. We just have to continue exploring the space. We've got to come up with a new idea, try and implement it, see if people use it. So our current hope is, will a nicely integrated comment on feature be of interest to people or not? If anyone has ideas for other things we should try, I'm delighted to hear about them, talk about them. Or if you have ideas or know of other sites that do interesting things that might be appropriate for the sort of scholarly communication context. And the next step is then to share this data we're creating and see if we can work with some other repositories to help build this publication network. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for Simeon?
Yeah.
It's admirable that you're trying these social mechanisms, and that's good, but it's not a matter of just using Facebook or not using Facebook. It's how you use it. And I think developing a social model that creates a motivation structure for people to participate and be active might be still a venture that you could do. Same thing with all the other aspects of arXiv. It's an admirable thing that you've done. I mean, it's all, I'm very much supportive. But I think you need to think about the social structure, the motivation structure.
So are you suggesting that we should create mechanisms which give particular reward for particular ways of communication?
Recognition. I mean, Wikipedia has many levels of these things. I mean, you want to give recognition about those who have contributed good papers or those who, whose papers have been viewed a lot, or typical things, but there may be other mechanisms by which you can have people comment, rate, or discuss papers in a richer way, and that creates more of a social community.
So I guess actually another reason for playing with these sorts of things that I didn't mention is that we all know that facilities to comment on papers are great. They're a good idea. We, arXiv, don't want to administer any such system. We have enough trouble dealing with debates around papers that are, say, not science, that yet people want to put into arXiv. We've had a mechanism using trackbacks to link out to blogs in the hope that we can connect with debate that we don't have to control and administer in the blogosphere. And that's somewhat successful for a certain section of the community. I'm certainly hopeful that some other segment, or partially overlapping segment, will use Facebook to discuss papers. Facebook's quite different in the sense that discussions are closed to some friend group. Your suggestion is really interesting. I'm just wondering how much we can go and create the reward structure, or how much we can fit in with perceived reward structures that the community has.
The question is, who you mean by we? Is it we, those who administer the system, or we, the readers and members of arXiv community? You may be able to arrange the layers of governance by which you can install people who will gain some value professionally by leading those discussions, or being, in a quiet way, being governance. If you don't want the public blogs there, which I can understand, there are still a lot of other social structures you can consider.
Right. Okay, thanks.
I'll talk to you after.
Yeah, please do.
Any other questions for me? Thank you very much. Sounds like you guys should have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.